Hello and welcome, dear viewers, to a new episode of Nile TV Newsroom Live. I'm Mohammed Abdelrahim. Tonight we have a number of different segments. First we start with politics, then we'll take a close look at business and finance, and we also have stories about the interesting worlds of technology and arts. In the final segment, we'll take a closer look at the sports world, so please stay with us. Welcome back. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi said the international community must shoulder its responsibilities to reach a ceasefire in Gaza. The president said that Egypt is ready to receive and coordinate all international aid being sent to Gaza. Al-Sisi was speaking during a meeting with visiting Cypriot President Nikos Christodoulidis in Cairo. During the talks, Sisi said there is a need for international action to implement the two-state solution and establish a Palestinian state with East Jerusalem, Al-Quds, as its capital. He also said that this is the path to achieving peace, security and stability in the region. For his part, the Cypriot president said he valued Egyptian efforts to calm the situation and added that Cyprus is keen on continued coordination with Egypt in this regard, especially in light of the joint vision between the two countries. During the meeting, both sides expressed keenness on cementing bilateral ties on the bilateral level and through the three-way cooperation mechanism, which brings together Egypt, Cyprus, and Greece. And staying at home, the activities of edX Fair and Exhibition continue for the second day on Tuesday. President Sisi on Monday witnessed the inauguration of Egypt's third Defense Expo, edX 2023, which runs until December 7th at Egypt's International Exhibition Center in New Cairo. The edX Fair and Exhibition showcases the latest machinery, equipment and technologies in defense, security and military fields, with the participation of 400 leading Egyptian and global corporations. The edX attracts 35,000 military personnel, officials, industry professionals and visitors from around the world. During the opening of edX, the inauguration ceremony, President Sisi was handed a shield representing the new Egyptian frigate Al-Jabbar from Egyptian Marine Forces Commander Admiral Ashraf Ibrahim Atwa. The 100% Egyptian-made frigate was manufactured at Alexandria's arsenal. Later, the president toured the pavilions of edX 2023, which is held under his auspices, inspecting main exhibits. He was accompanied by Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli, Minister of Defense, and a number of ministers. Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry heads to the U.S. capital, Washington, in a visit in which he will meet a number of members of U.S. Congress and Senate, including heads and members of committees concerned with U.S. foreign policy in Congress. The meetings aim to boost strategic relations between the U.S. and Egypt. Following the meetings, Shoukry will join the Islamic ministerial delegation that is due to visit Washington on the 7th of December. The delegation will hold meetings with U.S. Secretary of State, members of U.S. Congress and U.S. media in a bid to stop the war in Gaza, according to the directives issued by the recent Arab Islamic summits. And the Foreign Ministry has said that Egypt's representing office to the Palestinian Authority in Ramallah and consulates of the Egyptian Foreign Ministry are the only entities responsible for receiving names and documents of Egyptian citizens who want to return to the homeland. The Foreign Ministry said that detailed lists are made to be sent to the Egyptian authorities and authorities in the Rafah border crossing from the Egyptian-Palestinian sides to facilitate their crossing from the Gaza Strip into Egypt. A Foreign Ministry spokesperson rejected what had been reported in the media regarding the issue and called for exercising caution to any inaccurate information taken from unofficial sources. And the Israeli occupation forces continued to bombard the Gaza Strip on Tuesday, prompting a UN warning of an even more hellish scenario as fighting pushes civilians into a steadily shrinking area of the besieged territory. After initially focusing its assault on the north of Gaza, the Israeli occupation army has now sent ground forces into the south and dropped leaflets telling Palestinian civilians in more districts to evacuate. More details in this report.
Israeli forces pressed ahead with their air and ground bombardments of southern Gaza, killing and wounding dozens of Palestinians, even as the United States and United Nations repeatedly urged them to protect civilians. Asked about the mounting death toll since a truce collapse between Israel and Hamas on Friday, Israel's closest ally, the United States, said it was too soon to say whether Israel was doing enough to protect civilians and that it expected Israel not to strike zones it has identified as safe. Residents and journalists on the ground said the intense Israeli airstrikes in the south of the densely populated coastal enclave included areas where Israel had told people to seek shelter. At the United Nations, Secretary General Antonio Guterres appealed to Israel to avoid further action that would make the already dire humanitarian situation in Gaza worse and to spare civilians from more suffering. Scores were killed in Israeli bombardment on a house in southern Sheikh Radwan neighborhood in Gaza and residential complex in Jabalia northern the Strip. All mobile and telephone services were cut across Gaza due to the cut-off of main fiber routes from Israeli side. Meanwhile, Palestinian factions are going through fierce clashes with occupation forces deepening into Gaza Strip. Hamas movement announced that it destroyed 28 armored vehicles in the past 24 hours and targeted troops in a number of areas, causing deaths and injuries among occupation forces. It also said it targeted the Raim military base with its rocket system. Health Ministry in Gaza says the war has killed nearly 15,900 people in the territory, around 70% of them women and children.
And back home, the official election campaign of presidential candidate Abdel Fattah el-Sisi received a delegation of people with special needs, the differently abled. In his speech, campaign head councillor Mahmoud Fawzi said the political leadership in Egypt is giving special importance to the file of people with special needs and has made significant achievements in this regard. Fawzi pointed out to the law designed for people with disabilities and to using the term differently abled to signify them as people with skills and talents in many fields. He said the year 2019 witnessed the permanent representation of the differently abled in parliamentary councils after it was temporary for one legislative term. Members from the delegation also said candidate Abdel Fattah el-Sisi had given unprecedented support to the differently abled. They said he was keen to rehabilitate them and integrate them in society. Meanwhile, presidential candidate Farid Zahran met with villagers from Sindwa village in Al-Khanka city in Al-Qalyubiyya in a public conference. The conference was designed to listen to the villagers' demands and discuss his election program. During the event, Zahran's election campaign officials said the state needs to rearrange its priorities in various fields. For his part, presidential candidate Abdessamad Yamama concludes his election conferences on Wednesday, the last day of campaigning before the silence period starts. Yamama's election program is described as liberal, being the candidate of the Al-Wafd party. Yamama said his program prioritizes the citizen and focuses on education and health, since both files directly impact the citizen. He also said his program weighs importance to the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam file and to supporting the Gaza cause. In the meantime, presidential candidate Hazem Omar holds his fourth public conference on Wednesday in Banha City. The event reportedly focuses on the most pressing issues facing citizens in Cairo Governorate and South and Mid-Delta Governorates. The conference will also witness discussions of solutions presented in the election program of the presidential candidate. And under the slogan, "Go down and participate," the Cairo Governorate witnessed several gatherings to urge citizens to positively take part in the presidential elections. Organized by the Ministry of Youth, Health and Social Solidarity, as well as the National Council for Women at Cairo neighborhoods and urban areas, the gatherings provided awareness over ways of participation. Governor Khalid Abdel Al said he is confident the Egyptians will turn out to polling stations in support of the Egyptian state institutions. Away from home now, Ukraine's military shot down 10 out of 17 attack drones launched overnight by Russia. The governor of Ukraine's western Lviv region said 3 drones had struck an unspecified infrastructure target, but damage had been minimal and no casualties had been reported. Authorities in eastern Ukraine's Kharkiv region said drones had struck private homes and residential buildings, among other civilian targets in at least 2 different settlements. Kiev's Air Force said the drones were shot down over various regions of the country. It said 6 S-300 missiles had also been launched at civilian targets in the eastern Donetsk and southern Kherson regions. Russia has repeatedly denied targeting civilians in the Ukraine, but says the country's energy infrastructure is a legitimate military target. Over to the Philippines, where people evacuated buildings in the capital Manila on Tuesday after an earthquake measuring 5.9 on the Richter scale struck off Luzon. The Philippines Seismology Agency said on the X social media platform that it did not expect damage, but warned of aftershocks. The details.
Workers, residents and students evacuated buildings in the Philippine capital Manila on Tuesday after an earthquake of magnitude 5.9 struck off the main Luzon island, according to the State Seismology Agency and images carried by the media. There was no immediate reports of casualties, and the agency said that it did not expect damage but warned of aftershocks. Recorded the offshore earthquake at a magnitude 5.9 with a depth of 79 kilometers. Images shared showed government workers leaving Congress, Senate, Presidential Palace, Justice Ministry buildings. Also, students were evacuating universities. Transportation Ministry stopped train operations in the capital. European Mediterranean Center earlier recorded the quake at a magnitude of 6.2 before downgrading it to 6. Earthquakes are common in the Philippines, which lies on the Ring of Fire, a belt of volcanoes circling the Pacific Ocean that is prone to seismic activity.
The economy now, and the Suez Canal Economic Zone announced on Tuesday the signing of a deal with a business company on strategic cooperation in building and operating an integrated industrial complex for green energy technology on an area of 2 million cubic meters inside the affiliate zones of the Suez Canal Economic Zone. The signing came on the sidelines of the participation of the Suez Canal Economic Zone in the climate summit of COP28 being hosted by the United Arab Emirates. Suez Canal Economic Zone Chairman Walid Gamaluddin said that establishing a modern technological economic district came within the view of Egypt's vision for developing the energy file. And the Egyptian stock market indices were mixed at the close on Tuesday amid selling operations by local investment funds, Arab and foreign investors, while Arab and foreign corporations went into purchasing operations. The benchmark EGX 30 index fell 0.05% to end the dealings at 25,128 points. The equal weighted index, the EGX 100, was up by 0.8%, while the small cap index, the EGX 70, rose by 0.02%. Still with economic news here at home, Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli stressed the pivotal role played by the Supreme Council of Ports in light of the current undergoing projects to develop the port system, which aims to transform Egypt into a main center in the field of global trade. The Prime Minister's remarks came during his meetings with the Supreme Council of Ports, where they also agreed to change the Council's name to be the Supreme Council of Ports and Logistics, and to be included in the Ministries of Supply, Civil Aviation, Local Development and Trade and Industry. The meeting also tackled the proposed unified maritime law regarding maritime safety. Global markets now. Europe's main stock markets diverged at the start of trading on Tuesday following losses in Asia and on Wall Street. London's benchmark FTSE 100 index dropped 0.4%. In the Eurozone, the Paris CAC 40 rose 0.2% and Frankfurt's DAX index gained 0.1%. Germany's 10-year government bond yield dropped to its lowest in 6 months on Tuesday, and world shares paused around 4-month highs as traders upped bets on European Central Bank rate cuts early in 2024 and grappled with the Federal Reserve's outlook. The euro dipped, recovered, and was last down slightly at $1.0829. Equity markets retreated somewhat on Tuesday, with the MSCI World Index down 0.17%, edging off a 4-month high hit Monday after a storming November, when the expected rate cuts powered stocks higher in the US and Europe. Europe's broad Stoxx 600 index was flat, though US S&P 500 futures dipped 0.25%. Earlier in the day, the MSCI's broadest index of Asia-Pacific shares outside of Japan fell 1.1%, with Hong Kong doing most of the dragging with a 1.9% fall. Falling coal and gas prices pushed Australia's current account into deficit in the September quarter, data showed on Tuesday. In commodity trading, Brent crude futures traded up 1% at $78.95 a barrel, having fallen overnight on doubts that producers will make further cuts to output. Gold hung on above $2,000 after a wild session on Monday when it hit a record high in Asia before recoiling sharply lower. And in the forex market, the US dollar regained some ground on Tuesday and hovered near a one-week high against a basket of currencies ahead of a flurry of employment data that could upend investor expectations for the outlook for interest rates. Bitcoin held close to its highest since April of last year. The dollar index was up 0.1% around one-week highs. The euro had lost 1.34% since then, and the data was enough to persuade the ECB board members to change stance on rate cuts. The euro was last down 0.1% at $1.0821 and down 0.1% against the pound at 85.715 pence. Meanwhile, the yuan was unperturbed by Moody's decision to cut China's credit outlook to negative on Tuesday. In the offshore market, the yuan was broadly steady at 7.153 per dollar, having traded at 7.16 earlier on. The sterling was little changed at $1.2628, while the yen strengthened, leaving the dollar down 0.1% at 147.05. The Australian dollar fell 0.7% to $0.6576, below Monday's four-month high after the Reserve Bank of Australia kept rates at a 12-year high of 4.35% on Tuesday, as widely expected, and noted that economic data received since November had been broadly in line with forecasts. The commodity market now, and the oil output cuts agreed by OPEC Plus will take time to kick in, as the Kremlin confirmed that Russian President Vladimir Putin would visit the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia on Wednesday. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said Putin will also host Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi in Moscow the following day. Russia cooperates with all three countries in the OPEC Plus group of oil producers, which last week announced new voluntary production cuts that were greeted spectacularly by the oil market because of doubts as to whether they would be fully implemented. Oil prices fell 2% last week after the OPEC Plus announcement, but Brent crude futures were firmer on Tuesday. The visit comes after the OPEC Plus group agreed last Thursday to voluntary supply cuts totaling about 2.2 million barrels a day, including an extension of existing Saudi and Russian voluntary cuts of 1.3 million barrels per day. Global warming now, as money pledges stacked up at COP28 in Dubai, as delegates sought to address the huge gap between what is needed in climate finance and the amounts so far on offer. The details.
The United Arab Emirates, the host of this year's conference, pledged to mobilize $270 billion in green finance by 2030 through its banks, and several development banks announced plans to increase their funding efforts, including by agreeing to pause debt repayments if a climate-related disaster hits. The amount of cash needed for the energy transition, climate adaptation and disaster relief is overwhelming. A report released on Monday estimated that emerging markets and developing countries will need $2.4 trillion a year in investment to cap emissions and adapt to challenges posed by climate change. The 2015 Paris conference set a goal of limiting global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius, while aiming for a cap of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Vulnerable countries that are already being hit by costly climate disasters are asking for billions more through a newly formed disaster fund. Pledges to the fund so far total around $700 million. Other delegates, including UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, have called for an end to fossil fuel subsidies, which have hit a record of $7 trillion per year. The biggest pledge on Monday came from the UAE's banking system, joining peers in other regions in pledging to lend more to green projects. It followed a pledge on Friday of $30 billion for climate-related projects from the oil-producing Gulf state. Elsewhere, France and Japan said they would support an African Development Bank drive to leverage IMF special drawing rights for climate and development. The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, meanwhile, said it would include climate-resilient debt clauses in new loan deals with some poorer countries. Danish investment firm Copenhagen Infrastructure Partners announced plans to raise $3 billion for renewable projects in emerging markets. This year is marked by the biggest representation of business yet at the annual UN summit, fostering hopes for more private investment toward climate causes.
Sports now. Zamalek defeated Guinea's Kokoya 4-0 in the African Confederations Cup Group second round match at Cairo's As-Salam Stadium on Sunday. Earlier, the Cairo Giants kicked off their campaign in the group stage with a narrow 1-0 victory over Libyan side Abu Slim. Here are the details in this report.
Egyptian giants Al-Zamalek cruised to a 4-0 victory over Guinean side Suwar Koya in their second match of the CAF Confederations Cup group stage on Sunday. The Zamalek, who are aiming for their first continental title since 2003, dominated the game from the start and opened the scoring in the 8th minute through Ahmed Said Zizou, who headed in a cross from Mahmoud Shikabala. The White Knights doubled their lead in the 30th minute when Shikabala curled one of his trademark ball after a pass from Zizou. Tunisian striker Saifuddin El-Juzairi finally ended his goal drought as netted the third in the 51st minute after meeting a corner kick from Zizou with a well-placed header. Suwar struggled to create any chances and were reduced to 10 men in the 72nd minute when midfielder Abu Bakr Yatara was sent off for a direct red card. Al-Zamalek took advantage of the numerical superiority and added another goal in the final 15 minutes. Substitute Ibrahim Ndai, with an assist from Sayyid Abdullah, found the back of the net with a superb run. Zamalek top Group B with 6 points ahead of Libyan side Abu Salim and Angola's Sagrada, who lost 1-0 in the other group match on Sunday. Suwar Koya are bottom with 0 points.
A wonderful performance it was from Zamalek, who must be now considered the favourites to win the African Confederations Cup again after they won it back in 2019. The South American Football Confederation, CONMEBOL, said that next year's Copa America will be held across 14 U.S. cities, culminating with a final at Hard Rock Stadium in Miami Gardens, Florida. The first semi-final will be at MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey, with the other at Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte, North Carolina, while quarter-final action will be in Arlington, Houston, Las Vegas, and Glendale. The June 20 to July 14 tournament features 32 matches and 16 participating teams, 10 from CONMEBOL and 6 from CONCACAF, which covers North and Central America and the Caribbean. CONMEBOL previously announced that the opening match of the tournament will be at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta, Georgia. The other host cities are Las Vegas, Orlando, Santa Clara, Inglewood, Kansas City, Missouri, and Kansas City, Kansas. The draw for the 2024 Copa America takes place on Thursday. Still with news from the world's most popular sport. But over to England now, where Mikel Arteta said the Premier League has gone another level up from last season as Arsenal seek to open up a 5-point lead at the top of the table at lowly Luton on Tuesday. The Gunners, who beat Wolves 2-1 on Saturday, are 2 points clear of second-place Liverpool and 3 ahead of champions Manchester City after the weekend games, with neither of those teams in action until Wednesday. Arteta's men topped the table for much of last season, but faltered down the home stretch and were overtaken by Pep Guardiola's relentless City side. The Spaniard, bidding to win Arsenal's first Premier League title since 2004, said the league was even tougher this year. Arteta said he did not know whether his team were better than they were at the same time last year or not. In the meantime, Manchester City were charged by the Football Association on Monday over their players' behaviour in the final moments of the 3-3 draw against Tottenham at the weekend. Several City stars, including Erling Haaland, surrounded referee Simon Hooper after he failed to play advantage in the closing moments of a thrilling Premier League clash at Al Ittihad Stadium on Sunday. Haaland was fouled but shrugged off the challenge from Emerson Royal to play Jack Grealish through on goal, but Hooper decided to pull play back to award the hosts a free kick, having apparently already waved play on. Haaland continued to voice his anger as he left the field after the final whistle, and he kept up his protests after the game. Women's football now, but staying in Europe. UEFA said on Monday that more teams will qualify directly for the reshaped Women's Champions League group stage in the 2025-26 season, while the new women's second-tier European club competition will be a straight knockout format. UEFA announced a new format for the Women's Champions League group stage on Saturday, along with the creation of a second European competition for women's clubs following their executive committee's meeting. The current format of the Women's Champions League has sparked criticism in recent months, as only 4 teams qualify directly for a 16-team group stage from the 2025-26 season, where 18 teams will compete in the league phase, followed by knockout rounds instead. More teams will also be granted a direct qualification. UEFA said that in addition to the previous season's Champions League winner and the domestic champions of the 3 top-ranked national associations, the champions of associations ranked from 4th to 6th will access to the league stage directly. The runners-up of the 2 top-ranked associations will also be guaranteed a direct participation. In tennis now, where world number 5 Andrei Rublev will begin his 2024 season at the Hong Kong Open when the ATP Tour returns to the city for the first time in more than 20 years. The 26-year-old Russian will be joined by Grand Slam semi-finalists Francis Tiafoe and Karen Khachanov for the January 1st to January 7th event at Victoria Park, an important warm-up for the Australian Open. Men last competed for the Hong Kong Open in 2002, and former champions include such big names like Pete Sampras, Andre Agassi, Patrick Cash, Yvonne Lendl, and Jimmy Connors. Australian great Rod Laver also won the event, the inaugural edition in 1973. The fiery Rublev, who will be the top seed, won 2 titles this year at Bastad in Sweden and Monte Carlo. American world number 16 Tiafoe rose to prominence at the 2022 US Open, where he lost an epic 5-set semi-final to eventual champion Carlos Alcaraz, having knocked out Rafael Nadal in the last 16. Russia's Khachanov also has recent Grand Slam pedigree. He reached the semi-finals of the US Open in 2022, losing to Casper Ruud, and got to the last 4 of this year's Australian Open, where he lost to Stefanos Tsitsipas, veteran Croat and 2014 US Open champion Marin Cilic will begin his injury comeback at the event as well. The 35-year-old had knee surgery after suffering injury in January this year and only played 1 match on tour subsequently in 2023, sliding to as low as 666th in the world. And with the beautiful sport of tennis, we end this edition of Newsroom Live. We do thank you, dear viewers, for watching us. Next week, same time, God willing, is a new episode. Till then, this is Mohammed Abdelrahim, thanking you for watching.